From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where we can't help wondering if Ozzy Osbourne is commiserating with Mother Teresa in the great beyond right now, since they each had their death overshadowed by a more prominent death within a matter of 48 hours or so. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the Blast Radius. So good of you to join us this evening. There's your golden age of Western civilization news roundup for the week ending 25 July 2025. Dateline London, Monday, 21 July. Reform UK Party leader Nigel Farage gave a major address on the subject of law and order earlier this week, in which he opined in reference to the crippling obliviousness of the Westminster establishment, quote, "I think anybody in London doesn't even understand just how close we are to civil disobedience on a vast scale in this country," end quote. The latest powder keg is in the town of Epping in Essex, where citizen protests erupted last week in response to the alleged sexual assault of a 14-year-old English girl by an Ethiopian migrant being housed in a local hotel at taxpayer expense. Because nothing says cultural enrichment quite like your daughter getting raped by some African who just jumped off the boat less than a week ago. I mean, why beat around the bush? I have arrived in merry old England. I have secured free food and housing and medical care, so it must be raping time, baby. What a great country. Oh, but the guy has a very convincing legal defense, you see, and it's the same one we seem to often hear in every one of these cases. You see, our Ethiopian friend just didn't understand the cultural differences between his old home country and his new home country, so how was this guy supposed to know that in England, you can't just grab little girls and rape them? And is that really how things work back home in Ethiopia? Well, I can't say. But Mr. Farage is sending a very clear message to the Labour Party government of Sir Keir and the Stormtroopers, quote, "Don't underestimate the simmering anger and disgust that there is in this country that we are letting in every week. In fact, some days many hundreds of undocumented young males, many of whom come from cultures in which women and young girls are not even treated as second-class citizens. I do understand the genuine upset and anger, and I bet you the vast majority of people outside that hotel in Epping weren't far right or far left or anything like that. They were just genuinely concerned families," end quote. And he raises a salient point here, because the normal practice for Sir Keir and the Stormtroopers when law-abiding citizens complain about their daughters getting raped by illegal aliens is to dismiss the whole thing as some sort of right-wing extremism. Because, I guess being anti-rape is the new fascism. And why can't the English just work on being a bit more tolerant? When cultural enrichment happens to you, to paraphrase the great coach Bobby Knight, if cultural enrichment is inevitable, maybe it's best to just lay back and try to enjoy it. Dateline Sacramento, Tuesday, 22 July. On this week's episode of Hey, isn't this the exact same thing we said was going to happen because we're not idiots and we weren't born yesterday? A paper published on Tuesday by the National Bureau of Economic Research concluded that, drumroll please, California's $20 fast food minimum wage law has directly resulted in over 18,000 job losses in the fast food sector. But don't take this reporter's word for it. Let's hear it directly from the report. Quote, "In unadjusted data from the quarterly census of employment and wages, we find that employment in California's fast food sector declined by 2.7% relative to employment in the fast food sector elsewhere in the United States from September 2023 through September 2024. Adjusting for pre-AB 2028 trends increases the differential decline to 3.2%, while netting out the equivalent employment changes in non-minimum wage intensive industries further increases the decline. Our median estimate translates into a loss of 18,000 jobs in California's fast food sector relative to the counterfactual," end quote. Gosh, it's almost like Democrat politicians don't understand how the real world works. And boy, when they passed this bill a couple of years ago, they just couldn't pat themselves on the back hard enough. This was going to provide a living wage for every fast food worker. It wouldn't cause any job losses due to downsizing or automation, and nobody would care that much about having to pay 20% more for their In-N-Out burger. This is us, your California Democratic Party, making the world a better place for you cute little peasants in the food service industry. We have really got your back, guys. We care very, very deeply about our indentured servant class. Now drop the damn balloons and set off the freaking glitter bombs and wave your placards good and hard so the photographers can get all the pictures they need, but you better hurry your asses up, because we got a reservation at the French Laundry in 45 minutes, and you know how cranky Gavin gets if he has to wait too long for his foie gras. Dateline Winning Land, Wednesday, 23 July. In a starkly dramatic reversal, Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser said this week she will not withdraw her support for a new stadium for the Washington NFL Football Club, even if the team acquiesces to President Donald Trump's request that it revert to its proper name of Washington Redskins. Reporter Eric Flack from Channel 9 WUSA posted on Twitter that he posed that question to Mayor Bowser, and her response was, quite simply, no. But this is quite a departure from what she was saying back in 2022, when she flatly and unequivocally asserted that the city government absolutely would not support, under any circumstances, any new stadium project if there was even the outside possibility of the Redskins' name being restored. If one didn't know better, one might almost think the cultural winds have shifted a little bit within the past several years, and the same mayor who once gleefully festooned the public roadways of our nation's capital with leftist race huckster slogans isn't feeling nearly as confident about her position today as she was back then. And what a darn shame that is, seeing the worst practitioners of racial arson getting knocked down a few pegs. It really makes me very sad to see it. In fact, I think I might be getting a little verklempt, but we'll be okay. We'll all get through this together. Now, while some denizens of the fake news performance artist community have been flippantly dismissive of Trump's threat to make the stadium deal contingent on the restoration of the team's nickname, Mr. Flack of WUSA is apparently an actual journalist, surprisingly enough, and he outlined several options that would potentially be at the president's disposal should the team or the city be resistant to his very polite request. First, and this would be the most brute force solution, he could cancel the proposed lease by executive order, or alternately, he could apply pressure on the National Capital Planning Commission to change or delay the construction plans, or he could use his power with the Commission of Fine Arts to refuse to approve the design of the stadium. So there's basically three different ways he can veto the thing if he wants to, if it comes to that, which serves as a powerful reminder that the Washington, D.C. city government isn't really a city government. It's more of an amateur theater troupe that the federal government allows to pretend is a city government. But I'm pretty offended that we're even having this conversation at all right now, because the condition of Native Americans has improved so vastly and immeasurably since the Redskins and the Cleveland Indians changed their nicknames. And do we really want to undo all that progress? And isn't it the highest honor we could ever pay to our indigenous peoples and communities to erase them from the culture entirely? Dateline Lansing, Thursday, 24 July. Michigan has joined 4 other Democrat-run states in proposing legislation to ban immigration and customs enforcement personnel from wearing face coverings during the performance of their official duties. So to put it another way, the same people who wanted to throw you in jail for not wearing a mask just a few short years ago, now they want to throw you in jail for wearing a mask. I don't know about you, ladies and gentlemen, but I sure do love the smell of ideological consistency in the morning. In fact, if I didn't know any better, I might almost suspect that these people don't have any actual principles about anything, and they just build a new worldview from scratch every morning based on whatever happens to be politically advantageous today. Michigan joins California, New York, Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania, and I know those would have been your top 4 guesses anyway, in introducing such pieces of legislation as part of an attempt to, in their words, increase transparency and limit the agency's expanded powers, which is nonsense anyway, because the agency doesn't have any expanded powers beyond what it's always had. They might have a renewed interest in performing their mission, but that doesn't mean their powers have expanded or changed. So how about you stop lying for once, you lying ass liars? CBP can only operate within 100 miles of the border. ICE, on the other hand, has full jurisdiction to apprehend and remove any person who is unlawfully present in any part of the country. Nothing about this has changed in the slightest in the 22 years since the creation of the DHS department. And yes, since these are Democrats that we're dealing with, one can expect lots of hysterical, emotionally overwrought language. But don't take this reporter's word for it. Let's hear it directly from the facehole of the sponsor of the Michigan bill. Representative Betsy Coffey, a Democrat of Traverse City, quote, "For the average person, these incidents look like violent kidnapping. With this new federal tactic of wearing masks with no identification, there is no way for the public, the people being accosted or grabbed, or even local law enforcement and local state elected leaders to know who these folks are." End quote. Hey, Betsy, has any person been unduly inconvenienced who wasn't in the country unlawfully? Betsy? Betsy? Dateline Portland, Friday, 25 July. 2 Oregon high school girls who refused to share the medal stand back in May with a male athlete who had just won the state championship in the girls' high jump have filed a lawsuit against the Oregon School Athletic Association in which they assert that their First Amendment rights were violated when the organization excluded them from official photos and also withheld the medals that they had won, because that is just the way cultural Marxism works. You can't just go along with it part of the way. You can't express any sort of displeasure that you just lost to a dude. You have to go along 100% with each and every aspect of the transgender project, or you are to be shamed and humiliated publicly and have any honors that you have earned withheld, because that is just how tolerance and inclusivity works, guys. There's only one set of opinions you're allowed to have, and if you deviate from it, well, you're just going to be canceled and destroyed. I mean, come on. It's not like any of this is complicated. It is as simple as 1 + 2 = potato. The names of the plaintiffs are Alex Anderson and Reese Eckert, and we salute these young ladies for their bravery, because it is a very brave thing indeed to take a public stance like this in the state of Oregon. Miss Anderson said in a statement to Fox News, quote, "I recently competed against a biological male at my state track and field meet. Another girl and I decided to step down from the podium in protest to the unfair competition environment. I am fighting to keep women's sports XX and to prevent biological males in women's sports from becoming normalized. By doing this, I hope that all future generations of female athletes will have a safe and fair opportunity to excel within their sports. And if you find any part of that remotely objectionable, even if you think this teen girl ought to have had her life ruined for standing against something that is manifestly, demonstrably wrong, then congratulations, you might be a crazy person." And speaking of crazy people, you won't find any of those here at this program, a point that will be underscored even further after I now convey you into the firm but loving embrace of my distinguished colleague, your illustrious co-host, the man who does the official gender inspections at the Hominid Olympics because nobody else is trustworthy enough for such a lofty responsibility, the one and only your friend and mine, Mr. Caucasian Sasquatch.